Officially. All right, we are live, I believe. Yes, we are live.
All right.
And we'll give it a second or two for a couple folks to join us. Let's see here. See what time of day. Middle of the afternoon. I don't think I've ever actually done one in the middle of the afternoon. We'll may or may not get many folks on board.
A little automatically record and go on your channel, right?
There we go. There's usually a little bit of a delay when we go live and it starts streaming. All right, we got a couple people on. Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. This is Sean Cornett, national consultant here in St. Louis, Missouri, with my good friend, oh my gosh, and our upcoming speaker tomorrow night on Energy Gold Rush Live, Mr. Dennis Brown, out of, I'm always confused about this. Is it upstate New York? Is it northwestern New York? What is it considered?
It's both Western New York, Buffalo, upstate New York. If you're from New York, everything is if you're from New York City, everything is upstate. So Buffalo area.
Upstate Western. Fantastic. Well, welcome to the broadcast, Dennis. Great to have you. And for those of you just joining us live, maybe recorded as well, we've been doing some testing for our broadcast tomorrow night, our live in-home business presentation close. And we've got Dennis coming on tomorrow night. Every Tuesday we do that. Tuesday night at 7:30 Eastern and 7:30 Central. We've got a top speaker from the upper echelon of the Ambit ranks lined up every single week for you to host a home meeting around, and know that you can count on somebody to come in and provide a powerful live event, something that you can promote for, a story that you can build for, somebody like Dennis Brown, that's in one of the, the open spreads. Here, let me find it. He's in our current Successful Home magazine. What page are you on, Dennis? You probably know off the top of your head.
Yeah, I know.
There it is. Looking good on page 63. Dennis Brown, Rick, and Jen Vol as well.
Yeah.
So, somebody, a big name that you can promote for every single week and have an exciting event, even if it's just in your home, or maybe it's an office or a restaurant. But super excited to have you on, Dennis. Welcome to the broadcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Sean. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we've been chit-chatting about a few things, and there's a couple of gems or ideas that we've been talking about that I wanted to get on film here, on record from you, Dennis. So you've got a pretty serious corporate background, having built a pretty large shipping logistics company. Is that correct?
Yep, exactly. It was a logistics company.
And I imagine, and one of the topics you brought up here recently was the idea of getting outside of your comfort zone, something that's never comfortable, but I imagine you've had to do a little bit of that, both in Ambit Energy as well as in your past life with the logistics, huh?
Yeah, I think that's why when we were talking about it, I think it's an important topic for everybody that wants to be an entrepreneur, whether it be Ambit or otherwise, because that's usually one of the things that stands between people being, successful or not. You are always going to have to get out of your comfort zone. And no matter who you are, there's always a comfort zone. Some people are comfortable picking up the phone and doing invites right away, but they're not comfortable sitting down and doing a presentation. Some people aren't even comfortable picking up the phone or making a list or even calling people. So it varies from person to person. But the key is, and what I tell everybody is success lives on the other side of your comfort zone. So whatever that is, whether you're starting a logistics company, you're starting an Ambit business, you're building an online business, you're blogging, you're a speaker, whatever that is, there's always going to be those things that are uncomfortable. And usually what I found is that if you steer into those things, if you go head on into them, the only way to get out of that comfort zone and get over your fear is to really steer right into them. If you do the things you fear the most, they typically, it gets easier and easier every time. I remember the first time I did public speaking years ago, like most people, I was scared to death of public speaking and, fumbled and bumbled and I'm still not, perfect by any stretch, but it's pretty easy to talk to a group of people now, but that's only because I've done it and done it and done it and done it. And it's the same way with Ambit, is the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Sure. Absolutely. Putting you on the spot here, but what, if you can think of one, maybe what's one of the most uncomfortable situations you found yourself in that you had to personally push yourself past? And it might be Ambit, might be outside of Ambit?
Yeah, I think speaking was one of those. I was not naturally someone that would get in front of up in front of a group and speak. I remember it started with a small group of employees, and sometimes people that you know, speaking in front of people that you know is harder than speaking in front of a bunch of strangers because you're always concerned what they're going to think and what they're going to think of you. And so I think speaking was one of those things that it was difficult for me at first, and I think is difficult for most people. But what I realized is that, after I did it the first time, I realized it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought. And then just doing it over and over again, whether it be speaking to a group on a webinar or whether that be in a training or whether that be a business presentation, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And so that's one that was for me for sure. And I mean, I probably did my first real speaking of any size, maybe 15 years ago. And then, it's kind of, I've done more and more of it over time. So it's just gotten easier.
Sure, sure. Of course, in the Ambit world, I think you use the most common example that people have is, as far as comfort zone, is picking up the phone. 9 times out of 10, that's what holds people back in Ambit. Any specific tips that you may have to help someone get over that and get outside of their comfort zone? I don't know if anything comes to mind beyond what you shared, but since that's kind of our topic and that's the most common thing that holds people back, what one thing would you say to somebody that's just got that chronic fear of getting outside of that particular comfort zone?
Call somebody that you're really comfortable talking. So if you make a list of 10 or 20 people when you first start, pick that person that you're absolutely most comfortable. That might be your grandmother. That might be your brother. It might be your best friend. It might be mom, dad. It might be somebody else. It might be a coworker, just somebody that you have that comfort level that they're not going to judge you. You're comfortable that they're not necessarily going to judge you. And then rather than pitching them, or rather than necessarily trying to do a real hands-on invite, what you do is you ask them if you could practice with them. And so you might say to your brother, hey, listen, my brother, Steve, hey, listen, I just started a new business and I really, I want to practice something. Would you mind giving me, a couple of minutes? I got to practice part of how this business works. Would you give me a couple minutes? Sure. And now all of a sudden, now I'm just, we're just having a dialogue and I'm not necessarily worried about what he says because I've already kind of tuned into the fact that I'm not any good at it. I need to practice it and you're going to help me out. And the byproduct of that, number one, it takes a lot of the pressure off. Number two, he's not going to be nearly as critical of what you say. And number three, who knows, you might just hit it out of the park and he may actually say, hey, listen, what's this is all about? And so I think that's one of the things that I've done with people that are really apprehensive to pick up the phone or do an invite. That would be one of the things. The other thing is, beyond that, just finding that really easy person that you can talk to would be practice. I'm a big guy who I'll practice in the mirror, right? I mean, when I need to learn something, whether I'm speaking or I'm learning how to do a rebuttal or I'm learning something new, I mean, one of the things I do, it's really strange and you guys might think it's really weird. I'm driving in my car and I'm talking to myself and I can do an invitation. I remember when I joined Ambit and I watched the video with Ray Monty where it talks about his invitation, because he does a lot of the jumpstart training on the invitation. I remember, doing that invitation in my head over and over again. And then I just started verbalizing it in the mirror, whether I was driving or otherwise. So I think the two things would be, find somebody that's really easy to talk to and ask if you can practice. And then the other thing is do it in the mirror, do it while you're driving, do it someplace that you're comfortable with, and just do it over and over again. And I think you'll get a lot more comfortable with it.
I think that's so valuable, the repetition aspect of it, whether you're repeating it by making the invitations or just repeating it in the mirror. The more times it comes out, the more comfortable it gets, whether you're doing it live or doing a practice. It's just a fact.
Yep. Absolutely. Repetition gets you a lot more comfortable. Just do it over and over again.
Absolutely. Just hearing yourself saying it, time after time, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. And it builds confidence because you don't feel like you need to read it. You don't feel like you're reading it off a script. It's comfortable. So your confidence goes up, that gets conveyed. And, people feel that when you're talking to them on the phone. Nobody wants to sound like they're reading a script. And and I'm not talking about having to do it hundreds of times. I'm talking about doing it, 10, 20, 30 times, before you ever start calling somebody. That could take you 5 minutes. You know what I mean? An invitation's quick. So it doesn't take you very long to do that. But then all of a sudden, now you get that comfort level, you get that confidence, and then you immediately after that pick up the phone and make the call, because you don't want to wait a day to do that, because now all of a sudden now you're not going to have that confidence anymore, right? So right after you do that repetition, you want to pick the phone up and make that first call. Eventually you're going to have to eat that frog, true. Right?
What's interesting about the invitation, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, Dennis, is that, it really is one of the most simple things to do in Ambit Energy. Again, we talk about, say less to more people.
Yeah.
It should be something that's extremely short and simple. And honestly, it should be fun.
Yeah.
And the beauty of this, and something just to think about from a mindset perspective, I think for folks, is that if there's really one thing you get a good at in this business that will determine about 90% of your success, or, going to the 80-20 rule, 80% of your success, it's the invitation. But it's also the simplest thing to get because it is so short. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, the secret to doing it well is to keep it really short. Don't try to be that person that you're not. Don't try to act like an expert. My invitation is really simple. Hey, Sean, I got a business idea I want to bounce off you. When can we get together for 15 minutes? It's that simple. It just rolls off my tongue because I've done it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And, your invitation and somebody else's invitation might be different than that, or slightly different, but the key is it's really short. I don't get into, Death Valley, and I don't start talking about energy and deregulation and all that. You didn't notice any of that. Hey, Sean, I got a business idea I want to bounce off you. When can we get together for 15 minutes? That took 10 seconds.
It did. And the way that the confidence you had in sharing that, I would find it very difficult to believe that, hardly anybody would question you. They'd be like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah. Let's get together.
Yeah. Very few people. I would tell you that, out of the invites that I put out there, with warm market, 7 or 8 out of 10 people, I'll end up getting a meeting with at some point, whether it be over the phone or face to face. And if it's cold market, it's obviously a little bit different, but I would also approach it a little different way too. So,
sure.
But yeah, I think keeping it really short, being postured is another important piece. I think people in Ambit, a lot of times I see them, and what I mean by posture is not necessarily how I automatically sat up here in my chair, but more in how you present yourself and how you convey yourself, being confident, not arrogant, not being, overconfident, but being confident, putting it out there and saying, hey, I got something that I'm really excited about, and I'd really like to get your opinion on it, not begging somebody to take a look at the business. That's a bad habit that I see people have. Hey, they're really wishy-washy about it. And as soon as you hear that, Sean, your red flags go up and you're like, I'm going to punt on this one, right? This just doesn't sound appealing to me, so carrying yourself with a certain amount of confidence, and that comes with time, but it's one of those things, everybody's bad at it before they're good at it. So just get out and do it, have fun with it. And don't sweat it so much. You're not going to break anything. No one's going to really get that upset about it. Just, get through that first 10 or 20 invites and you'd be surprised how much easier it gets.
Absolutely. Well, to go not quite to maybe the entire other end of the spectrum, but one of the other things we have been talking about before this was the idea of texting and how that might play into the invitation process, and might actually be a little bit controversial even in the world of network marketing or Ambit Energy, because I think that obviously the ideal is to, for the invitation to be verbal, to, connect with somebody that way. But, you've had some success with texting. So what does that look like? How does that work? And how can someone, in what scenarios might someone use that?
Sure. So there's just certain people that join Ambit Energy that are not comfortable. You can see it. And if you can't see it, you'll recognize it because they're not inviting anybody, right? They've made a list and they're not inviting anybody. And there's usually a reason for that. It's usually fear, right? They're afraid of what everybody's going to think, or they're afraid that they're not an expert, or they're afraid they're going to screw it up. And so when I recognize that, that's when I typically will go to them and say, hey, listen, it's obviously you're not comfortable making a phone call right now. And that's all right. In a perfect world, that's what we would do. But if I asked you to send 10 text messages to people that are on that list, would you be able to do that? And 9 out of 10 times, they all say yes. And so what I do is I give them a little bit of a script where it's a little bit of an invite where they would send an invite via text. And the way you do that is you kind of ping the person. If I was going to invite you, Sean, I would send you a text and say, hey, Sean, what's up? And my objective is to get you to respond. Hey, nothing. What have you been doing? How you been? Where you been? Hey, good to hear from you, whatever that is. And then you go and do the same sort of invite that you would verbally over the phone, but you're just doing it via text. I would send you the same invite. I'd say, hey, Sean, I got a business idea I want to bounce off you. When can we get together on a quick phone call for 15 minutes? Question mark. And the reason why people are comfortable, my invite on text or phone is really almost exactly the same. The difference is over text, what happens is those people have a lot more confidence because I'm not worried about Sean saying, hey, is this a pyramid scheme? Hey, is this Ambit Energy? Hey, is this one of those things? Because I don't have to respond to them. I get the text back and I can sit there for a minute or 2 or 3 or 5 minutes and not respond. Or I can think about what my response is. I'm not going to be put on the spot where I'm totally thrown off and I start sweating bullets and you know what I mean? And I'm really concerned. I can craft my message back and I can put a quick rebuttal there and say, hey, listen, too hard to explain via text. Just give me 15 minutes. I promise it'll all make sense. Done.
Sure.
And then he's either going to say yes, no, maybe. We schedule the appointment. And then when we show the video, when you do the appointment, a lot of times some people you might use, like, for example, that's a great opportunity where you would use the EGR system to send a text, send that link to them so you can track, they're watching the videos and that sort of thing. Or you can just schedule an appointment. Maybe you're doing a coffee meeting at Tim Hortons, or maybe you're doing a over the phone presentation. But what I found with the texting is that you'll get people that will never make a phone call will send out 10 or 20 texts. So just imagine if you had everybody on your team that never invited the first 10 people on their list, and you could just get a fraction of those people to text 10 people a good invite. How much further along would they be? How much further along would your business be? How many more customers would you have? So it's not always, one of the things that, one of the sayings that I heard early on when I started studying network marketing was, it's not always what works, it's what's duplicatable. Right? It's the things that allow you to duplicate. And I think that texting will sometimes be more duplicatable for an average person than an actual phone call and doing a presentation over the phone. So that's when and how I'll integrate it. It's not for everybody. And if you're comfortable picking up the phone, I would always advise picking up the phone.
Yeah.
Right? That's the perfect way to do it. You're never going to get a better way to connect than over the phone. But if you're apprehensive, doing it via text is better than not doing it at all.
That's absolutely true. Gosh, I couldn't imagine if I had everybody over the years in my organization
Can you imagine?
that dropped off without really doing much, maybe getting their first couple customers. And if every one of them just sent 10, properly formulated text message invitations, it's insane to think about what that would have turned into.
What's really funny is this, I've trained, on our team, I've trained, I don't know, we've done some webinar type trainings and some Facebook type trainings, and let's call it maybe hypothetically 100 people like we've kind of trained on the system. When somebody goes out and does it and they text their first 10 people, typically they're going to get, if they follow the script, they're going to get 3, 4, 5 appointments. And the confidence that they get from setting those appointments is unbelievable. It's like, it's that initial surge of confidence that you need in order to take the next step, as opposed to sometimes the negativity you get when you make that first phone call and you get some rejection, right? When you get rejection face-to-face or over the phone, it hurts and it sometimes takes people out of the game. But rejection via text is typically not nearly as painful, even if you do get it. Yeah. And I found that you're going to get, people will send 10 or 20 text messages way faster than they'll make 10 or 20 phone calls. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Well, hey, we actually have a question here from Shay Irvin. Appreciate the question. It actually ties in perfectly with what we've been talking about. How do you suggest to motivate your downline consultants after they've triggered and are not getting any customers or consultants? Some might not even answer your phone calls or messages. Well, Shay, you are the only one in the planet that this has ever happened to. I'm sorry. We don't really know what.
Yeah.
No, that's actually extremely common, unfortunately. What are your thoughts to that question, Dennis?
I'm a big believer in what Brian McClure says. It's very hard to motivate people. I think motivation has a tendency to be temporary and very short lived. And so, I think you can drive yourself crazy trying to be that motivational speaker. And it's also not very duplicatable. But what I'd rather see and what I teach and what I try to do myself is I try to more inspire them with action, right? So if I want somebody to go out and sponsor somebody, or somebody to go out and spend time with their new consultants and do a home show, or I want, or I want them to go out and get free energy. The best way to do that, I'm out there doing it, or to show them somebody else in the organization that's doing it. So the way you do that, if I have a brand new consultant that comes in and hasn't done much but trigger their first bonus, but I've got another consultant who's one away from regional consultant and they joined around the same time, I'll use that person as a way to inspire that other person as an example and say, hey, listen, you can do it. I believe in you. And here's why. You remember Joe, you met him at the local meeting. He's only one away. We can do that for you. All you have to do is X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And so you got to give them a little bit of direction at that point. So I'm a little bit more believer in inspiring people than I am motivating people, because I think motivation is short-lived.
I think that is so absolutely true. And, what's interesting is that what you just said applies not just to the motivation, inspiration process of working with your team, but as well working with your prospects. A lot of times they need to be inspired of your initiative and your commitment to the opportunity before they're going to hop off the fence and join.
Right.
A lot of times people follow up with the same prospect over and over and over again. You're going to show up to a meeting. You're going to come this week. They keep delaying and putting you off. Well, maybe all they need to hear is that you're doing this business with or without them.
Right.
And that's so true on both sides of that coin. So that wisdom there is awesome.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about it that way, but that's a great point.
Well, any parting words to share with folks that may be watching live or recorded?
Join us tomorrow night. We got the BP tomorrow night. What is it, 7:30 and 8:30? Is that what you said?
7:30 Eastern and 7:30 Central.
Okay, 7:30. Yeah, 7:30. Right. I'm in East Coast. So.
Well, actually, not take that back. 7:45 is when we'll go live. And then just to kind of give an explanation of how it works, I did a little bit at the beginning, but it's a live broadcast every Tuesday. We do 2 of them, so that every Tuesday evening at 7:45 Eastern and 7:45 Central, you can plug into a live video broadcast where the top leader this week, of course, it's you, Dennis, where I'll be introducing Dennis to close out your meeting. Or maybe it's just a one-on-one. Maybe you're going to click play on the video at 7:30 so that at 7:45, you're switching over to YouTube and you're going to watch Dennis close out your one-on-one presentation in live fashion. And it'll be Dennis essentially just like he would do from stage at a live local business presentation, but it'll be live via YouTube closing out your in-home meeting or one-on-one or small group or whatever it is.
Yeah, you guys don't realize how valuable that tool is. What Sean and those guys are doing here by doing this every Tuesday and bringing in new speakers. What he said at the beginning of this was, you have an event to promote. You've got a new person to promote. So what you do is you open up that magazine, and as ugly as my bald head is, show them and simply say, hey, listen, this guy, as an executive consultant, tell a little bit of a background. It'll tell you a little bit of a story in the magazine, and then tell that story and just say, hey, listen, come in and listen to him. and then just give me your thoughts on it. And you invite them, and you use that event and that story and that new person every week is a way to do two things. Number one, get new people into your funnel, but also to move those other people along, because we all know that the average person is going to have to see this 3, 4, 5, 6 times maybe before they're going to engage. I know that Sean needed to see it a few times. I know that a lot of people needed to see it a few times before they decided to engage with it. So just because people don't, don't pull out their credit card after showing it the first time, don't give up on them. The fortune's in the follow-up. And this is a great way also to start doing follow-up with people, because now they're going to get exposed to new people. And eventually, someone's going to resonate with them. So if you had somebody who was from the trucking and logistics industry, or they were an entrepreneur, or they were on Inc. 500, and they were a very successful entrepreneur, it'd be a great time to invite them to this, because as a part of my story, they're going to relate to it. If you had, other people on here, whether it be Brian or Steve Thompson or whoever, or Rick Ball, who was a beer salesman, right, and got laid off 17 days after, and realize, there's going to be certain people who are going to relate to him. So, that the value of having this week to week is incredible. And if you guys don't plug into it, you're just foolish.
I can't argue with that. Well said.
Awesome.
Well, thank you everyone for joining live, and of course the many more that will watch this recorded, and we'll see you Tuesday evenings, and hopefully this Tuesday, which is with us today, November 30th, 28th. It's Cyber Monday. Get out there and buy some stuff, and then come on over and watch tomorrow night. So thanks so much, Dennis. We will see you all tomorrow.